up, World Raid Team? Back at it again. Welcome to the episode. Before smartphones, before Switch, before mobile gaming, there was one system that ruled the streets, the buses, the classrooms, and every kid's backpack, the Nintendo Game Boy. It was simple, it was sturdy, and it dominated the handheld world for over a decade. The Game Boy was a great innovation, well ahead of its time. Almost everybody had one. They weren't even that expensive. I think they went for like $80, and the games weren't that expensive too. The games were kind of short though, which I didn't like, but they made so many good games. It was just a great little handheld system. I think it took 8 batteries, and they had so many accessories that came along with it too, which made it an even better product. And it even evolved over time, making it one of the best handheld systems of all time, in my opinion. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this episode. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Welcome to the birth of a legend. When Nintendo dropped the Game Boy in 1989, it didn't look like much. Gray plastic, black and green screen, no color, no backlight, but it was portable, fun, and it was built like a fucking tank. So I'm gonna butcher his name. The creator, Gunpei Yokoi, had a simple philosophy: lateral thinking with withered technology. That meant using older, cheaper tech in creative ways. The result, a console that was affordable, reliable, and ran forever on 4 AA batteries. While Sega and Atari had to go high-tech with color screens and sound, Nintendo focused on gameplay, and it paid off. So that was huge, having a system that you didn't have to continuously put batteries in. So Sega had their own handheld, and Atari had the Lynx. Sega had the Game Gear, Atari had the Lynx, and those systems were by far the better product. The graphics was better, the color was better, the sound was better. But you put the fucking batteries in, and you were only playing for like 45 minutes to an hour. As for Game Boy, you could put those 4 batteries in, and it's a lot longer. I don't know exact time, but I know you played it a lot longer because it was less pulling from the energy or whatever. So although they had the better product, people got the Game Boy because it was cheaper, first of all, and the batteries lasted longer. No kid wants to continuously put batteries into a fucking game system, and no parent wants to continuously buy batteries for the kids. So that was a good trade-off, I guess, in that aspect, and one of the major reasons why they sold so many. Everybody had a Game Boy, and like I said, they weren't super expensive. The games were good, even though they were short, and the product was better than the other products. And you can drop that shit a million times and it wouldn't break. I know I dropped so many Game Boys and they didn't break, and I was fascinated by how resilient they are. The first wave of games. The Game Boy's killer app was Tetris. It came bundled with the system, and suddenly everyone from kids to grandparents was addicted. It wasn't just a game, it was a phenomenon. Then came Super Mario Land, Metroid 2, Return of Samus, and The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. These weren't watered down ports, they were full Nintendo experiences in your hand. The library exploded fast: puzzle games, platformers, sports, shooters, even role-playing games, adventures. It was proof that small didn't mean simple. They had some of the best fucking games. I love the Mario Land series, especially Super Mario Land 2. That was my favorite one of the series. I didn't play Metroid. I'm not a Metroid person. I just didn't like it. And I played the Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. That was low-key one of the best games on Game Boy. And how they put those good graphics on that were amazing. The gameplay, it felt like a real Zelda game. It felt like a Zelda game that you would get on Nintendo. That's how good it was. And they made the remake or remaster for the Switch, so you can get that if you never played it for the Game Boy. But it's a fascinating game, and how they got all of that in that little device was amazing to me. But they had so many good games, it was ridiculous. I even played Madden they had Madden on Game Boy. it wasn't as bad as you think either. So they had a bunch of games that they took from Nintendo and put on Game Boy, and it made sense and it looked good. Not the best graphics, but they played well, and you were satisfied with the product that you got. Dominating the handheld wars. The Game Boy didn't just win, it obliterated the competition. Sega had the Game Gear, full color, but battery hungry. Atari had the Lynx, big screens, but huge price. Even NEC's Turbo Express couldn't match Nintendo's combination of cost, battery life, and game quality. Nintendo didn't care about flashy tech, they cared about fun and reliability. You could drop a Game Boy down the stairs, spill soda on it, and it still would turn on. That's not marketing, that's history. Durable, dependable, and decades ahead in staying power. So as a kid, I dropped that shit a million times and it never broke. Maybe the back came off, the back that you close up the batteries in. That's the only thing that I remember ever falling off of that. But you can literally drop that shit a million times and it wouldn't break. Unlike games and shit that we have, like you drop the phone one time, that shit'll shatter or whatever. But they made that shit so sturdy and put it together so well that it could withstand dropping it a million times and not breaking, which was fascinating in my opinion. And like I said, the cost was not overwhelming, even though it didn't have all the bells and whistles of the Game Gear and the Lynx. It was a better product and it had better games. So I don't know how they did it, but they were genius. But that's Nintendo in its prime. They put out products that people want and games that people wanted. And those other systems, even though they were better, they didn't have the quality that Nintendo had. And I guess that's one of the main reasons why Nintendo's still around today. And those companies aren't even close to being around. There's no Sega anymore. There's no fucking Atari's been dead. And Turbo Express, the TurboGrafx, never even had a chance. The evolution. Nintendo didn't just stop with one version. They evolved it step by step. In 1996 came the Game Boy Pocket, smaller, lighter, with a cleaner screen. Then in 1998, Game Boy Color. Finally, color graphics, games like Pokemon Gold and Silver, The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Ages, and Super Mario Bros. Deluxe made it feel brand new. And when Game Boy Advance dropped in 2001, it wasn't just an upgrade, it was the start of a new handheld era. Better sound, full color, smoother gameplay, and iconic titles like Metroid Fusion, Mario Kart Super Circuit, and Advance Wars. Every version brought something new, but never lost that Nintendo magic. So I had the Game Boy Color. I love the Game Boy Color. I played the shit out of Pokemon. One of my favorite games when I got that. I had the Game Boy Advance. I wasn't really into the Game Boy Advance, to tell you the truth. I was grown by that point. I was 21. And I got it, but I had Earthworm Jim and I think I had Street Fighter. But I wasn't really into the Game Boy Advance for some reason. Even though the color was great, it was like playing a Nintendo on my handheld or whatever. So it was pretty good, but I just didn't get into it. But Nintendo always knows how to reinvent itself, and those items sold a lot of units too. They sold a lot of Game Boy Advance. They sold a bunch of Game Boy Colors. I think Game Boy Color put them over the top because everybody I knew had one of those shits. Those were like one of the best improvements of an old item ever, in my opinion, in terms of video games. Pokemon changes everything. If Tetris made Game Boy famous, Pokemon made it immortal. When Pokemon Red and Blue hit in 1996, the world changed. Suddenly, Game Boy weren't just toys, they were social devices. You can battle and trade with friends using a link cable.
It's all 150 Pokemon by yourself. So close. You need a friend to trade with. So you can grab a link cable and a friend with a Game Boy and record packs and catch them all.
The first real portable multiplayer experience. The combination of Game Boy plus Pokemon was unstoppable. It sold hardware, accessories, even battery packs. By the early 2000s, Nintendo has sold over 118 million Game Boys worldwide. So that's what got me into the Game Boy Color initially. The Pokemon. I was a grown man by then. I didn't play Pokemon until '99, and this guy I was working with when I was in the military, he wanted to go to sleep. So I was like, I'm not gonna let you go to sleep unless you give me something. And he had his Game Boy, and he let me play. He had Pokemon Red, Yellow, and Blue or whatever, and I was hooked. The next day, I went and bought all 3 of them myself and a Game Boy Color, and I played that shit for hours. I love Pokemon. I love those games. I still play them on my Switch today. They are so good, and the ability. Nintendo was so ahead of the curve in terms of playing with other people. The Link cable was a masterpiece. To trade Pokemon using a Link, to actually have Pokemon in other games that they didn't have in it, and to actually have the ability to get those Pokemon. The only way to get the Pokemon is to trade with people. That was brilliant. And I love that whole thing. It was unbelievable. They were so smart. And Pokemon literally changed the game. It was one of the best games on Game Boy. Still one of the best games out today. Like I said, I still play it today. I love Pokemon. And the Game Boy Color just changed the game. The legacy. The Game Boy wasn't just a system. It was a movement. It proved handheld gaming could stand shoulder to shoulder with consoles. And every handheld since, DS, PSP, Switch, owes it all to that gray brick from 1989. It defined portability, simplicity, and play anywhere freedom. You could be on a road trip, at school, or hiding under someone's covers. If you had a Game Boy, you had the world in your hands. So yeah, the graphics were basic, the screen was tiny, but the fun, timeless. The Game Boy didn't just dominate handheld gaming, it defined it. That's gonna do it for the episode. Thank you guys for watching. I truly appreciate it. Let me know what you think about the Game Boy. Did you have one? Did you play it? All that good stuff. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. I would truly appreciate that. You can be on anybody else's channel and you decided to watch mine. I truly appreciate it. There's only 24 hours in a day, and you gave me a couple minutes out of your day. I hope I didn't waste it. Time is valuable. So have a good one. I'll get you guys on the next one. You've been watching